There's a huge wiener on the side of that truck.
Kind of makes me hungry looking at it. Hey. I love podcasts.
It looks delicious.
Well, we're live. Let's do this. Hey, welcome to Money Lap Podcast. I'm Parker Klugman, joined as always by Landon Castle. No, I have not switched up that intro, but you might have a chance to help me switch it up here soon. We're going to come up with a way for you all to contact us because we feel like we see a lot of feedback on the social medias and such, but we want to give you one great place to give us all this feedback. That's coming soon. On this week's episode, it's Monday, so we're going to do this a little different. Because there wasn't a ton of news out there, but there's a little bit from NASCAR we'll run through, and then we're going to dive into my preparation for going racing in the Xfinity Series at the biggest race of the year in Daytona, and what you can expect in the Cup race. So we'll deep dive into that stuff. We've got some F1 driver news, and what is it worth to you to sell your soul to go racing? We've got new car reveals and a spicy quote from Fernando Alonso, as well as World Rally coming to America. What's that?
I saw that one. I can't wait to get to that part.
Yeah,
I thought we weren't going to dwell on all that stuff. Anyways, let's go.
We didn't. We're going to go quickly. So let's start with the PR lap. And as I mentioned, it's now just been told to me that we can talk about this. Friends at themoneylap.com. Once again, that's friends at themoneylap.com to send us all your feedback of what you love, hate, and most of all, absolutely dislike about Landon and I. Send it our way. We love all sorts of feedback. What? Why are you so quick?
Just know, because you're sending it to friends at themoneylap.com means that we are now friends. So
we are friends.
If you want to be our friend, send it. If you don't want to be our friend,
mean.
Yeah, friends can be real.
And if it doesn't work, try again later. Also, speaking of friends, our pact, send this to 3 friends if you like it, because we'd like more people to listen to this, even though there are many, many thousands of you, considering we now started putting this on X and it got even more people out there, which is great. And also shout out to all the Reddit people who I saw a NASCAR on our Reddit NASCAR that they asked for the best NASCAR podcast, and we got listed a ton, Landon. So that was very cool.
Yeah. Shout out to Reddit.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Yeah, even knowing we're just out there. No new written reviews on Apple. We're at 141 5-star reviews on our quest to 200. Go leave us a nice message. We got some on YouTube though. Austin, Tom, and this is a long name. I'm not going to get there. Love the show. Keep it up. And UGA fan, 12132. Renger was maybe the best interview I've ever seen. Thank you for having him on.
I saw
cool.
that.
Renger Vander's in. Yeah.
That's kind of a cool. That's a big statement.
That is huge. I thought he was fun, and he lived up to what he is like in person, which is he doesn't hold back. He's pretty outspoken. And overall just a really cool dude that drives really damn fast race cars. So you can't help but not like that.
Talking about his process. That was cool.
Yeah, it's fun. Hey, so there was a little football game last night called the Super Bowl. But more importantly than the game, Super Bowl commercials. I thought they were fun. But the best one, to me, Dunkin' Donuts. Knocked it out of the park.
That's a good one.
Thought that was hilarious. Yeah. Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, you get me every time there. If you put together a Good Will Hunting cast, I'm all in. Add in Jennifer Lopez and some ridiculous sort of, acting bits. I thought it was great. Did you have a favorite?
I don't know if I could pick a favorite, but I did notice something about Super Bowl commercials that are trending towards just having a collection of celebrities in a commercial, not just a celebrity.
Yep.
In each commercial. And I'm wondering, how much do those celebrities get paid? When you like the Dunkin' commercial. Like we
were thinking, what, $1 million
bucks
each?
12 celebrities in that commercial?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm thinking Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, I'm thinking $1 million each, somewhere around there. Right? Just for the commercial. Because they're basically their name and likeness. They're going to run that for a year, not just the Super Bowl. Plus it costs $7 million for 30 seconds. And then the crazy thing they're all doing now, if you noticed, is they're leveraging the celebrity past the commercial, where the commercial comes out and then that celebrity tweets and throws up an Instagram reel of the commercial, or more behind the scenes from the commercial, right?
They're at the game.
They're at the game. It just all sort of builds on itself. And so it's like It's a massive campaign centered around 30 seconds.
So, okay, you have 2 seconds to answer this question.
Okay.
All in, what did
Yep.
Duncan spend for Super Bowl?
Oh, $25 million. I wouldn't be surprised.
I bet that's the floor.
You think?
I don't know. I mean, there's 15 celebrities in that commercial.
Yeah.
And you just
And
rattled off
they'll
one of them
leverage it
that
all year.
You just rattled off one of them that you think made $1 million,
Yep.
right?
So, I mean,
Anyways,
just do that
20 million,
over the year.
20
That's
million at
basically
least.
like, okay, so it's basically a full-time Cup sponsor. It's Pennzoil level
For Super Bowl
sponsorship
ad.
for the Super Bowl ad. But they'll leverage all year. So what works better? I don't know. Maybe NASCAR. Maybe you should have looked at NASCAR, Duncan. Give it a try next time. Come to us.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put some Dunkin' Donuts on my sandwich at lunch today.
That is good for
In
you.
support
That's healthy.
of-
That is really healthy stuff. That's the kind of health-conscious living that professional race car drivers really, just live for. So, one
what
thing
else
we
is
don't
going
live
on?
for, we don't live for this, but we're just going to talk about it for a second. Self-driving cars. Bit contentious
I don't-
topic out there.
Not a
Don't
fan.
love them. I've driven a couple of them. None of them are what I consider self-driving. They're assisted cruise control at max, and recently over the weekend, I guess there was a Waymo car, which is a self-driving company in San Francisco, that got attacked by a mob of people that eventually ended with it being lit on fire.
Oh my gosh.
We can not confirm nor deny that there were professional race car drivers in that mob. Have no idea. Can't tell. Can't say. So,
That makes me
don't
realize
like to see that
my
sort of stuff. But
my meme about anti-self-driving cars has been quite dormant for a while. It used to be in my Twitter bio that I was an anti-self-driving car activist. Obviously.
were you in San Francisco last week? Last couple days?
No, I was not. No, I do have an alibi on that.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, all right. I'm just making
But-
sure.
Well, shout out to Waymo for they've been grinding it out for a while. Every time I go to Phoenix, you see those cars around. I've never actually ridden
know.
one though, but
No, I haven't. I don't want to. I don't need it yet. We're not there yet. We don't need to be.
self-driving cars yet.
On the highway, I can see it. Elsewhere, seems far too chaotic.
I like
and
lane assist and adaptive
I love that.
cruise. I utilize those.
I use them too because I call them. I think of lane assist and sort of the active cruise control as like bumpers on a bowling alley. Like they kind of just keep you in your lane. They keep you,
Yeah.
just sort of you bop around. So
Yeah.
and it's wonderful, and it just allows you to be a little bit more relaxed on a long drive on the highway. Totally behind that.
Let's talk about some real driving for a second. Some
we
real
should.
racing, because there was some
Moving
real
on.
racing going on this weekend.
Well, there was, and to be honest, I don't know if I was inceptioned or what, but last week's episode, I said, almost as a joke, but being halfway serious, that because of this inspiration of snow racing I saw in France many years ago, the NASCAR Clash should go and do something crazy like be in Aspen or Big Sky, Montana. What was happening this weekend? Literally a snow race in Aspen, Colorado. The Fat Ice Race group, which started over in Switzerland, did one in Aspen. And I guess Porsche is behind this, and they're a big part of it and that sort of thing. But they had some amazing cars. My buddy Lee Keene was out there with his Safari 911s, which if you've seen the 911s that are raised up and sort of look like they're ready to go off-roading and rally racing, that's him. He builds all those. Awesome business. Waitlisted for years. Can't get one, even if you wanted it. He was out there, and they were just run these things through the snow, and I saw Tanner Faust won in a VW Golf. Which I thought was hilarious. But I just thought that was so cool, and you know what? It paves the way, pardon the pun, for the NASCAR Clash in Aspen.
You know what? I feel like we're burying the lead because this was just in our notes to talk about this.
What's that?
No, about this whole race, because I had realized that really, really one of my best friends in the world, Jake Wolf, was out there this weekend. And
No
so if you go to his Instagram, it's Jake, Jake, Wolf, Woolf. on Instagram and on TikTok. He's got a bunch of content from this event. So, which he did he did a ride with Mr. Porsche. So I think it's Faraday Porsche. Is his name Faraday? I know I'm saying it with the most American accent possible. So
I'm going to let you go with that one because I can't correct you.
I don't know.
You got Porsche right.
I don't know the proper way of saying his name, but there's some. If you look at Jake's Instagram, he rode with Faraday Porsche. Looks like he drove a go-kart on some ice, like a shifter cart or something like that. So there's some cool stuff. Maybe not a shifter cart. I doubt that Jake was driving a shifter cart. But
I'm just going to put out there, I believe the Money Lap needs to be at this event next year. So
that and Goodwood.
No, we have to be. This is ridiculous that this happened and we weren't there. This time next year, we'll be coming to you live post Aspen, horrendously hungover.
Maybe
from the
the Money Lap
and the drinks.
Maybe the Money Lap can race some kind of obscure ice car, and then we can put it into production to be a diecast collectible sold on SpoilerDiecast.com, one of the fastest growing companies in the diecast industry, because they pride themselves on their inventory, their exceptional service. All of their orders, as you know, Parker, ship same or next day, ensuring you get your hands on your favorite diecast products in no time, including whatever Money Lap obscure diecast we end up coming up with and selling on SpoilerDiecast.com. They also offer free shipping on orders over $20. That's right, you have a smooth, affordable shopping experience with SpoilerDiecast.com. They have over 800, and that number is going up. Unique products currently in stock. They have one of the largest inventories in the industry. NASCAR, dirt, sprint cars, IndyCar, F1. You've heard me list all of it. We are all racing fans. We love growing our collections. We're going to try to find some kind of golf with ice tires and snow tires to sell on SpoilerDiecast.com. But until then, you can go to SpoilerDiecast.com and get geared up for the NASCAR season.
You know what we need to do for the ice race next year that will become our diecast? We go through Castle Motors. We get some great cars no one's thinking about. Turn them into ice race monsters and go win up at the ice race in Aspen. That's what we're doing. Can't wait.
That might be more from our salvage yard at Sunline. Is where we get those cars, not the front line at Castle Motors. But yeah.
Yeah, well, we use your contacts and your industry knowledge.
There you go.
So, perfect. Great job. Great transition. I would buy a Money Lap Ice Race diecast. Remember, you can get my diecast at Spoiler Diecast as well. The Big Machine number 48 Spike Light Coolers diecast. Pre-order it, and you can get one that has me autographing it as well. So that'd be cool. Let's move into NASCAR quickly. Just some big topics that are floating around the NASCAR-verse. Tony Stewart basically said that SHR needs to pick it up and that their performance is not acceptable as of late. They've got a young lineup there with Noah Gragson, Ryan Preece, Chase Briscoe. And what did I just forget? Fourth one.
Josh Berry.
Josh Berry. Thank you. Hey, guys, we're a really knowledgeable racing podcast. Can't disagree with them. We'll see if SHR can pull it off. And then just friend of the pod, Raja Karuth, finally announced he's full-time in the Spire number 71 truck in 2024, racing for the Truck Series Championship, which is cool to see. Frankie Muniz will attempt to make the show for the Xfinity race with Joey Gase racing. So Frankie making his Xfinity debut. So we'll get a lot of attention there. That'll be fun. Hopefully we can get him on the pod. I've been trying for a while. I'm going to keep pestering him. Hopefully we'll get him on soon. Talk about his love of racing. And my old truck team, Henderson Motorsports, we had the Bean Machine for a while. They're rocking the Hot Dog Hot Rod. This ballpark buns rolls car truck. I like it. But as I mentioned,
there's a giant hot dog. There's a huge wiener on the side of that truck.
Kind of makes me hungry looking at it. Hey. I love podcasts.
It looks delicious.
Take it down in one bite. All right. Okay. So I mentioned that we were going to do something a little different than just ripping through and diving into those topics. Because Daytona is coming up, it's the kickoff for NASCAR across all three national series. Of course, for myself, racing the Xfinity Series, We start with our biggest race as well as the Daytona 500 and Cup. I thought it'd be fun if you and I just chatted for a little bit about how a driver goes into a season for our listeners out there, because we are drivers who wouldn't know exactly what we're doing in this time leading up, and then how we tackle being the first race of the Super Speedway is our biggest race. So personally, for me, the process obviously starts basically when we get into 2024 in terms of, starting to look at last year's notes and crafting some of the things I feel like I need to work on and look at. It starts with tape. So tape is big for Super Speedway racing. The people have heard us talk about that. That's more this week for me. Prior to this, I did look at some tape and utilizing some help I have now, looked at some specific scenarios I felt like I could be better at in the draft in terms of timing runs and timing blocks, that sort of thing. And then the last piece for me for Super Speedways that's always important, iRacing. I go on iRacing and I run Super Speedway races, not because do I think the draft model is exact? No, it's not, but it's fun and it's close. It's the biggest thing for me. It doesn't matter if it's Talladega or Daytona, is to go and just start making those decisions in a draft, right? Those last minute split second decisions to block a lane, to come back in front of another lane, to take a run or don't take a run, to choose the bottom or use the top, to be aggressive and make a third lane come in, that sort of thing. iRacing, I always feel like just is a great tool for me to get those moments in my head playing out, not just sort of in terms of visualization, but actually doing them and making those decisions. And I don't make a lot of correct decisions. I did Talladega the other day, and I wrecked on the last lap. So probably had it won, which was unfortunate. But the point being, I thought for everyone listening out there, like that is how myself is going into Daytona. And then the last thing is mental mindset. So last year I discovered, when I get halfway through the year, I started to look at when I was successful in Super Speedways versus when I wasn't. And what I really landed on was that some of my best moves and my best ability at Super Speedways comes in the last portion of the race, when I'm the most just like in the zone, making moves, that sort of thing, and I'm super intense about it. And so when I went in the July or August Daytona last year, I for weeks I kept trying to tell myself, how can I get into that intensity mode on lap one? And sure enough, it was a game changer for me. Got more stage points, was able to just be in the front the whole time. We, got down late to the race and we're in the conversation to win it. Did the same thing at Talladega in the truck race in the fall. Had that race, was in perfect position to make a run at it, coming out of turn 4 and made the wrong move. But the point being, I won a stage, stayed up front, just kept the intensity level high. And so that's definitely how I'm approaching Super Speedway racing in 2024, considering we have 2 races off the bat with Daytona and Atlanta back-to-back. Have I missed anything? What would you be focusing on?
No, you gotta. I think the intensity is a really important one that you're absolutely right on. I think those weeks and days leading up to the race, is my research has always been a little bit more fundamental and just strategy focused, like you described. I've found a lot of success in super speedway racing, especially in 2022 going into super speedway racing, just setting my strategy, which was which lanes I liked for overtaking, what I felt like my strategy needed to be when we were single file around the top, in order to leapfrog positions. That was the kind of stuff that I watched film for, that I prepared for. You're absolutely right about iRacing. The drafting model itself isn't necessarily what it one-to-one comparison to what you're going to experience in real life, but just sharpening the mindset, it's really useful for that. But yeah, I kind of would go into Daytona and Talladega with the lanes I wanted to be in, how I wanted to overtake, and then once you get to the racetrack, I think it's just all about intensity. And just finding, like you said, finding that way to be focused from lap one, because it's really easy to get lazy in the middle of those races.
Yep.
Because
you can get lulled into it, basically.
It's not the reason it's easy to get lazy is because you're not necessarily driving the car itself to its absolute limit. You're wide open a lot. You have the ability to maneuver lanes. You can choose where to take the car, right? And at a 1.5 mile track, you can't always choose where to take the car. The car, you're on the limit of the tire. So it just comes way more natural to be focused at a short track or a 1.5 mile track. It's really easy to lose focus at a super speedway. And like you said, Parker, you got to make sure that you don't lose focus because there's stage points to be earned, and there's track position to be earned. So that intensity is important. I spent a lot of time on pit road, so Daytona has a pretty unique pit road with some unique segments. So I'll usually spend a little extra time there and make sure I have a good strategy for how I want to drive pit road. There's always a couple positions to be gained getting on and off pit road, and you're pretty much guaranteed to have at least one green flag pit stop, even in the Xfinity race. So I always make sure I'm pretty well prepared for that. And then also, I know you and I talked about it on the phone the other day, but just being the first race of the season, I'm make sure that my body is where I want it to be. A, fitness-wise going into the season, but B, just weight-wise. We have to weigh in. So you're kind of, as a driver, you're trying to make sure that you're right at a cutoff weight, so that once you do weigh in, you can start cutting, shedding some pounds, and then maybe by mid-season you revisit your weight the next time you get scaled in for the playoffs. But the way NASCAR does their driver weight is the car and the driver have to weigh the same amount for all competitors. So if you have a heavier driver, their car can weigh less. If you have a lighter driver, they have to add more weight to the car. But at the end of the day, all cars and all drivers have an equal weight amount. So the drivers are incentivized to weigh in heavy so they can have a lighter car. And then obviously if you can shed that weight over the course of a month or two, then you kind of reap the benefits there. Obviously,
and
NASCAR at any time technically can just pull the drivers back and reweigh them. And I think that has happened before. It hasn't happened to me, but I think it's happened before. But I've never gotten egregious with weight stuff. I've just always, done it legit. So I always show up to Daytona a little bit heavy. Belly full of a big breakfast, drink about 3 or 4 bottles of water before I go weigh in. And usually, if you're a 165-pound driver, you can get yourself to 170. And that 170 is a threshold that matters. So we don't have to spend too much time talking about weight, but that is an interesting little nugget that people don't always realize.
I have a joke about it because we do all our photos and everything a lot of times at Daytona, and there's a lot of like pre-season, get the new, the latest look of your fire suit, and everyone's the chubbiest they're going to be all year because everyone's trying to be just that little bit higher, get in the next bracket. So it's by 10-pound increments, basically. And so I always laugh because everyone rolls into Daytona. You think like, in the offseason they've been training as hard as they can. And yes, but at the same time, you're trying to be as heavy as possible in that one moment. Personally, I, usually am my heaviest around this time right now. So a little bit of holiday weight, a little bit of purposeful muscle weight, and from this point onward it's more about cardio training and that sort of thing to be for stamina and to sort of get my weight probably back to a little bit lower. Last year for the playoffs, just the last thing on this, we have a mandatory meeting for all the drivers at Bristol for the kickoff of the playoffs, and it was really funny because Wayne Otten does this, who's the series director, and he does this speech about, hey, you guys made the playoffs, here's what's focused on you, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, all right, and now all of you are going to get down to your boxers and weigh in. No one knew it was coming. And it was like, oh, okay. So I thought that was kind of funny because they have that power to do it anytime. You mentioned something else that was really cool, and I think we should just dive into it for a sec because it plays into what Cup drivers are focused on as well in the Cup Series and just super speedway racing in general, and that is this idea of being able to, or get lulled into sort of relaxing, right? The intensity comes down. It sounds ridiculous. You're going 200 miles an hour. You're in a pack of cars. The air is buffeting around you. Even when we're running up next to the wall, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very intense environment. But because you almost get desensitized, especially in a long run, 40 laps, right? 30, 40 laps to the speed, you can, I've seen it on my Whoop, which tracks my heart rate. You can relax. And that is one thing where I see it, where someone relaxes, a move gets made, they react late, and that kicks off a wreck, right? And that is one of the things I have, I felt like just staying up front and the idea of just trying to be up front has worked for me to keep that intensity up, because it's in those moments where I get lulled or I get relaxed that I find you open up that possibility for mistake. And we saw it in the truck race last year. You pointed it out with, I think it was Crafton in his wreck. He sort of got relaxed in that mid lane, didn't protect. Bam, he was in a wreck.
Right. That was just a mental. That was an unforced error on his part at the time. But, statistically, in the Xfinity series, the safest place to be in the field is in the top 6 at a super speedway.
Makes sense.
The top 6 are the bottom 25, or not bottom 25, but 25th on back. Those are the safest places to be, right? Obviously, we don't want to just ride around 25th or worse. No. We're trying to score stage points. So it is important, Parker, talking to you, to make sure that 6th place is an important number, to be 6th or higher to actually protect yourself from a wreck. And I found that was that's a data point that I lived to in my last full season of racing, and I found success with it at super speedways. I did fairly well, and when I was running the top 4, top 5, it just seemed like every time there was a wreck, it was behind me, right, or right next to you, but you slipped through it. So in the Cup Series, that's a different number. In the Cup Series, there is no safe place, believe it or not, statistically.
Okay.
There is no safe place in the Cup Series. Yeah, and that's the field, and the reason being, I think, is just because the field is tighter and more competitive, and more consistent talent all the way through the field. That there's really no predicting where the wreck's going to come from. It just comes from anywhere.
That is pretty interesting, because I've always told people about super speedway racing and Cup is like a controlled wreck every lap of every second. That just doesn't happen. Because especially the old car, before the next gen, you would be in Talladega, you'd be in 3 or 4 wide, and you would run lap after lap, and in the middle of the pack, you will see things. A car gets really like a big wiggle, or it touches someone's left rear real close, and there's a little pop, a pop of smoke that no one would see from the outside on the TV cameras, and you're like, oh, that's a wreck. Oh, that's a wreck. Oh, that's a wreck. And they just don't happen because the talent level is so high. Everyone's so good, and so it makes sense that there's probably no safe place because everyone's so damn good. Which I think is, it's a testament to the talent level of the Cup Series, but also just the intensity, and it's easier to keep that intensity in a Cup race, even with that being that long. So if you're listening and you're a driver and you're about to approach Daytona, intensity, understanding where you want to be, and a strategy, keeping the top 6, you might have a chance. So that's my plan. Hopefully we can kick off Daytona with a win, lock ourselves in the playoffs, have an excellent season, and build on last year, finally get that monkey off our back of getting a checkered flag, which would be awesome. Also, this race is the highest paying race of the year.
There you go.
Anything for the Cup Series we should be paying attention to before we move on, just for people listening out there? I think with the next-gen era, what has changed and what teams are continuing to figure out, and I can tell you this is a big topic, is less the OEM stuff and more the idea of fuel, and how fuel saving is becoming important, because we talked about it on the React that will be up on our YouTube channel here this week, where we watched last year's race, and sort of dissected what we saw in that race and the moves we would have, we thought were good and bad. But one of the big things, and the topic that's going to continue, is that if you save fuel, your stops are shorter. It allows more of the window to be opened up in terms of your strategy, which can get you track position, because it is hard to move forward in the next gen era. So we'll see if that continues to play out. But that would be something I know, if I were going to pit report this race, that when I went and talked to 10 or 12 crew chiefs, they would talk to me about fuel, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, that's that'll be particularly interesting, and that's in that third stage. That's where we'll watch that the most. And shortening those pit stops if you can shorten it by 1 second or even half a second, that just makes a big difference. We've seen with this next gen car that those long green flag pit cycles turns into some separated single file groups. And that's what those manufacturers want at the end of the race. They want to break away and have a 4, 5, 6 car draft 10-car draft. 10-car draft gets a little bit too much to where 10-car. I'm sorry, I'm walking all over myself here, but a 10-car draft is going to be one of the fastest single file lines there can be. 4 to 5 cars is not fast enough. Those guys will end up getting caught up. 8 cars, 8 to 10 is about a good number for a really fast single file line. Any more than 9, 10, 11 cars, when you get into that number, now you're getting enough cars in a line where somebody's going to go side by side, right? And then it's going to slow down that group, and it's going to bring in a whole pack. So what these manufacturers are trying to do in those, closing stages of a race is find a 7 or 8, maybe 10 car group to be able to pit with and try to make a single file breakaway from the field. And that's where, like you said, that's where the saving fuel plays into it. Who can have that fastest final pit stop, break away from the lead pack, and run away from them.
One last point on that bit, and it actually goes for Xfinity and Cup. Stage points. One thing you need to think about with all the old-fashioned style of laying back, unless you do that in stage 3, the loss, if you're someone who can be up front in terms of points, can be massive. If you win, just say you win both stages at a super speedway, the worst points-wise you can finish is somewhere around 20th. That is hugely different than getting wrecked with 2 to go and finishing 34th, right? And getting just a handful of points. And so the incentive to be up there, up at the front for stages is massive. And so for the Cup side, you start that fuel saving on lap 1, and you start to think about that because those stage points, if you can have that opportunity, can make the outcome of your day massively different. Think about the 3-car of Austin Dillon last year. He ran the back, then didn't get any stage points, got in position there just for the last couple laps to be in a top 3 or maybe make a move on his teammate to win. He gets wrecked. He gets almost nothing out of Daytona at that day.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Huge loss.
And where that compounds for those drivers and teams throughout the season is in this even more competitive Cup Series that we're seeing, more competitive than ever, is you want to eliminate those 30th place or worse points days, right? Because now you have teams that have a win that are 25th in points that are going to get in the playoffs. So you have to get, the amount of points that it takes to make the playoffs is higher than ever. And it's this earning stage points over the course of the season, increasing your average per race points is going to be more important. It's not just about where you finish.
Well, we have given away all the insight. If you are approaching this weekend, you now know exactly what to do. That means I know what to do. There's no excuses. Time to go get the trophy. Last bit on NASCAR before we move on. Legacy Motor Club is going to go field a team in Extreme E, the electric off-road racing series. Jimmy Johnson will drive in most of the series races, but he can't do the opener because of the Daytona 500. So our buddy, Travis Pastrana, is going to be filling in for him, which is cool. And I think this is sort of a response to Ganassi leaving the series. I'm guessing that Legacy Motor Club kind of filled that position and opportunity. So cool to see. It's an interesting series. They kind of go rally rating, and you have to have a male and a female, and it's interesting. I've watched a little bit of it, so we'll see how Jimmy does. Back to his roots in off-road racing. Let's move out of NASCAR. I think we've covered it all. That's what's going to happen at Daytona. We made our picks, I think. Did we make picks? Do you have a pick for a winner, Daytona?
No.
Cup?
I haven't made any picks.
I have a pick. You want to make one?
Sure.
All right. I'm going Kyle Busch. He gets it done.
Daytona 500.
Daytona 500. It's his year.
I don't think so. Kyle's not a Daytona guy.
He was close last year.
Well, he's good at Daytona. He's not a Talladega guy.
Yeah, and he's got ECR power.
He is good
driving
at Daytona.
For Richard.
Yep.
I think it's the year. He gets it done. Who you got?
I don't know. Do you go with a logical decision, or do you just go for an insanity Daytona? Like, does John Hunter Nemechek win Daytona 500?
That would be big for him. You just got to make a pick. You really probably just Probably just
I'm.
need to
You
pick
know
one.
what? It's the year of William Byron for me.
All right. Big William Byron fan of.
I'm going all in
Hammering
on
that
William
one.
Byron this year.
If we were allowed to bet, you would be all in on that guy. Well, hopefully he can live up to it for you. We'll see. Let's move on. Formula One. It's a series that's quite large, and that means a lot of people want to be in it. And to get to it, it takes a massive financial backing amount to get there in the form of dollars and money and monetary devices that you can provide to get into a car and to get through the ladder system from karts through the junior formula to getting into an F1 car at times. 20 years ago, it was somewhere estimated around 12 to 15 million to maybe 20. And now it's gotten as high, I believe, as estimations that to get to Formula One is going to cost you somewhere in the range of $30 to $40 million in total funding needed from karts all the way into the car. Now, obviously, that doesn't always come from the driver. Maybe that comes from sponsorship or these development programs that the F1 teams themselves have, but
That
it
sounds
takes a massive
light.
amount of money. Well, it could be higher, 50 million, 60 million. I don't know. If you're Lance Stroll, it's probably in the hundreds of millions because your dad bought a team. So I don't know if it's really – that's just the estimation of taking – if you went, series by series all the way from karts up. So it's an immense amount of money. Nonetheless, last week, one of the most – I don't know if this is the word for this. I think worst deals I've ever seen in the history of a driver trying to get themselves funded. Nyck de Vries, who was let go from AlphaTauri last year, had taken on a loan from a supporter in the form of $250,000 that gave that person 50% of their earnings if they made it to F1 by a certain date. Now, that was 2022 that he had to make it to F1. He was a reserve driver for Williams when Alex Albon was under the weather. I believe it was at Monza. And so Nyck de Vries filled in for him. The supporter felt like then, what's the term I'm looking for?
Nick owed him?
Yeah, activated the clause, which is that he then gets 50% of his earnings, which then the next year
forever earnings.
Yeah, career wildest thing ever for $250,000. This, then, he goes and races for AlphaTauri in 2023, or gets that full-time opportunity basically, and then was let go. This person is now suing him for those earnings, and I don't know. I mean, this is in America. I feel like this is something that would have been predatory, maybe thrown out. There are drivers, so we could talk for 30 or for 3 hours on the amount of drivers out there who have done different schemes to get funded, whether it's giving away future earnings, or I believe Justin Wilson was on the public stock exchange as his entity at one point.
Really?
Yep. There's multiple drivers. Scott Dixon and a lot of those drivers out of New Zealand do deals with a group that actually helps fund them and then gets a percentage of their earnings after that. There's a lot of drivers who have done this. There have been some in NASCAR who have done it, right? And the idea being that, in the driver's position, especially early on, they don't have a lot to lose. If they don't make it there, they don't owe it, right? But if they do make it to the top, they do start making significant income, they reward the people who supported them. Pretty simple scheme in that sense. I think this one is, as I said, predatory in the idea of that amount of money being worth 50% of career earnings when a driver, the floor in F1 now is $1 million. And the question that comes out of this is, Landon, what are you willing to sell your soul for to get to F1? Because that's
these deals
essentially what
just
this
don't.
one was.
These deals just don't typically work. I've turned down deals like this in my career. Actually, very early in my career, I had a deal similar to what Nick was offered there, where it wasn't 50% of my earnings, but it was more like 10 or 20% of my earnings. I don't remember exactly. I think the number that this group was willing to invest was like somewhere around $1 million in my career. This is when I was a teenager, so I was like 16 at the time. And basically it was they were investing a certain amount of money in my career, and then once I got to NASCAR, one of the top 3 series, this is how the contract was written, trucks Busch Series or Cup, that they would start recouping that percentage of my career earnings for the rest of my career. And I did not do the deal, and glad I didn't. I do know another driver that did that deal with that entity, and that driver did make it to NASCAR, and did end up having to. It got out of the deal one way or another. I think he just didn't want to pay it, because at the end of the day, it's not a. I mean, they're bad deals for both parties, really. And so even beyond that deal, I've been, I don't want to say faced. I've met with plenty of people over the course of my career that have tried to express interest in some kind of investment or something in like me as the athlete as opposed to sponsorship. And I've never really come up with a structure that worked for me or the other party. And I don't really know how to explain why. It's not like, there's golfers that do this with great success, I think. But I think that the cost, I think that the cost of funding a golfer in comparison to what the potential upside is, makes it worth it for the investor and makes it worth it for the golfer. To invest a couple $100,000 on someone whose career earnings might be several million a year, I think can pencil out. But for a race car driver, a couple $100,000 is just like, it's like a coin flip on whether that even has any bearing on whether the driver can, if that money helps the driver make it to a professional level or not anyways. Yeah. The only way to properly have the funding to get someone to the professional level is to commit millions of dollars, and at that point there is no way to recoup that money just purely off of driver earnings. Race car drivers just don't make that kind of money, so there's really no, it's a difficult thing to put together, and then obviously you can't, if you're a driver like Nyck or any of these drivers who have owed money to these investors. And I'm not trying to say that the drivers are morally right in this scenario, but it's like, what, you can't force a guy to go drive a race car just because he can to recoup the investment. So it's just the incentive structure is not right. And then to read about Nyck's deal, he had to make it to F1 by a certain date. So he was incentivized to not race F1. Like what? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, not that really played into this deal. It sounded like he was a reserve driver, and then he got his ride in 23. But they just don't work. They're bad deals. I don't know one that has ended well. I know several drivers, not just the example that I gave. I know several drivers. I know drivers in the Cup Series right now that have taken deals like this. But I don't know a single deal that played out the way that it was written up to begin with. Every deal that I know of has either ended in a lawsuit, has ended in some kind of outside settlement, has ended in some kind of buyout, because once you get to the point of the deal happening, everybody realizes this thing doesn't work.
Yep. And I think it's the earnings of drivers in the top level of motorsports fluctuates so drastically with the popularity and the sponsorship around the sport that, if you make a deal in the early 2005, in 2015, 2018, you're going to be pretty disappointed on what the earnings were compared to 2005. Like, that's just fact.
So I called you on the phone on this, and but I had a conversation with somebody just the other day that was talking about what their plans are for this year, and told me about the driver they're working with, and they were like, the driver's dad is paying $80,000 a race for the driver to be in this car. It's in a NASCAR top 3 series car, truck, Xfinity, or a Cup car. And they're like, oh yeah, they've got plans to run this many races, and the dad is paying $80,000 a race for the driver to drive this car. And I'm like, how rich do you know what I mean? Like how, and by the way, these people this isn't like Middle Eastern oil money rich, right? This is like,
yep,
Midwestern small business successful family money type rich, or Southeastern. I don't know where they're from, actually, to be honest with you. But like, this isn't even like my dad owns a Silicon Valley investment firm. This is like my dad owns a big construction company, and has
done well.
Has
but
done
there's,
well.
There's
but
there's
like,
rich
at what
and then
point
there's
is
racing rich?
how many $80,000 checks do you got to write to race a car before you realize that the teams aren't paying? You know what I mean? Like, Jeff Gordon maybe made $20 million, but that was 20 years ago.
Yep.
Right. There's nobody in the Cup Series. If you have to spend $10 million to get your kid to the Cup Series, it might take him maybe 10 years to recoup that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to let him support a lifestyle and pay for, live, and then also recoup your own investment. Or, I guess we're talking about parents and dads, and there's no, I don't know, there's no financial economics here that makes sense to me.
Yep.
Unless these people don't know, unless the people getting into the sport right now maybe they're not thinking of it like that. Maybe we're jaded because we've been around. Maybe they haven't had this. Maybe they haven't had those conversations with a big team yet, where they realize, my kid's not going to get paid unless there's money to pay them, like somebody else's has to pay them, the sponsor, because the teams don't reach into their pockets right now at the truck and Xfinity level, especially to pay a driver $500,000.
Yep. It's a really interesting situation because there is a lot of enthusiasm around motorsports right now, right? And it's in a good spot, and it has massive media deals across F1 and NASCAR, and you see all these numbers, and then you realize the trickle-down effect is not great there. The pointy end can be lucrative, but it's a very small percentage, as with anything in life, right? You got to be at the top 1% if you want to be the one
but
reaping
there's a lot of people.
rewards.
I mean, there's a great living to be made in racing.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely,
and
definitely.
it doesn't. And there's a great living to be made in racing for drivers that are in the Xfinity Series and in the Truck Series, right?
Exactly.
I'm not trying to say that there's one way or the other, right? I mean, look at, and not to just like start naming people, but like you can look at the Xfinity and the Truck Series roster and look at any driver that's been there for longer than 2 or 3 years, and you know that guy's probably finding a way to make a living, right? Jeb Burton.
Exactly.
Right. Stephen Parsons. Tommy Joe
Justin
Martins
Allgaier.
obviously owns a team. Justin Allgaier, is maybe on the pointy end of the spectrum because he's got a high-level sponsor. But, there's drivers out there, Ryan Ellis, like those guys are making a living. They're finding a way. They might be making $100,000 a year. They might be making $250,000.
Yep.
Right? It's when you introduce somebody's paying for that somehow, for them to make $100,000 a year, for them to make $250,000, right? Somebody is paying for that. It could be a sponsor, it could be their parents, right? Obviously, I know that Jeb Burton's dad is not stroking $80,000 race checks. Jeb Burton is running a business. He generates his own sponsorship revenue to get himself in these rides. But when you bring in like these Truck Series drivers and these young drivers, where dad is writing $100,000 check after $100,000 check. And you do wonder, like, what's the strategy there? When does that end? Do they expect it to end? Do they think, at what level do they think, or have they been told that team owners will start paying them and not the other way around?
Where I was going with it was, what are you willing to spend as the cutoff to eventually flip to the other side of getting paid, right? And I think there are drivers right now in the Cup Series whose families spent well above $20 million for them to be there, right? And is it paying off, right? What is the timetable that's going to pay off? Does it matter? If you're willing to spend that amount, does it even matter to that family and their wealth, right? So, actually some that are above 25 that I know of. So it's, I think that's where you have to do that. They have to have almost like an internal check, and do they have good advisors and good people around them that know the sport really well and have said, hey, look, here's the situation, here's what it's going to cost, and not to put wool over their eyes, and say, hey, no, you win the race and you'll be paid. It's like, no, that's not how it works, right? This is going to be a long-term plan, and you need to have a plan with it. And I think that's what's going to be super interesting looking at drivers like Kevin Harvick's son and Kyle Busch's son and so on and so forth, who are these drivers who, are going to be doing this in a way that, like, they're already getting sponsors very young, and they're probably planning this out 3 or 5 years or more because they know what they're up against, right? And they know, and they probably internally are like, look, I know this is going to work or not at this point, right? So I find that interesting as we see, those families and how they do it versus a family who's not endemic to racing and is trying to figure it out from the outside, which is tough. There's no right way, Landon.
Interesting stuff. Plenty more conversation to have about it. This has been
definitely
very enjoyable. I do want to get to a couple of those things that we referred to earlier in the show. Alonso had some good quotes. Let's finish up on the F1 stuff before we move on.
We did take a little bit. We got sidetracked a little
detoured,
bit, but
that's okay.
It's all right. Sometimes not every road is straight. So I just like this quote from Mick Schumacher, who has admitted to being in contact with Toto Wolff to replace Lewis Hamilton. He is, I believe, their test driver. And he said, his quote is, "I think few people know how good I am. I did quote tweet this and said every sports car, indoor karting hero, and sim racer." And by sports car, I meant club racer, sorry. Basically, anywhere you go in the world that someone drives race cars or karts that isn't professional yet, that's a good quote that you will hear. So, Mick,
some of the names that I've seen thrown around for this Mercedes ride have surprised me that maybe Mercedes is looking at George Russell being their lead driver here and filling
I think he's ready.
That role with either a rookie or Mick Schumacher, who wouldn't be necessarily a rookie, but he would be a risk if you're talking about trying to compete at the championship caliber level that Mercedes is expected to compete. But hey, if George Russell is your guy, he might be ready. Like you said, he might be ready, and then you can they can make that move with Mick and build him up to where he needs to be.
I stand by George Russell. I think that guy's a boss. Total boss.
I don't think there's any reason that wouldn't work.
No, I think that works, and I think it's down to what level of risk. Is it a Mick Schumacher? Is it Kimi Antonelli, the F2 driver that has been tabbed out there? I like Mick Schumacher because of the marketing can hold off the pressure of needing to perform at a high level right away. So that'd be interesting. We've had some more car reveals. We don't even need to go into that. One thing from the American in F1, Logan Sargent put out last week that he's gained 5 kilos, which is 11 pounds, after a draining 2023 debut. So he's rethought his training approach. And Rethunk it. Yeah, that's a word. We'll see. I think he's showing up just like all the NASCAR drivers. Little plump right now. So we'll see how that plays out for him. But we mentioned at the beginning, the greatest thing to happen in F1 this week, that was, I thought, the most intriguing, was Fernando Alonso at the launch for the Aston Martin Challenger in 2024, was quoted as to say he felt like Lewis had a different dream than going to Ferrari just 12 months ago. And so it was kind of throwing shade on this idea that Lewis was like, I've always wanted to drive Ferrari. This has been a dream of mine. And he was like, I feel like 12 months ago your dream was just to stay with Mercedes forever. So I don't know what the animosity is there.
Was that not your dream 6 months ago, I think is exact what he said?
Yeah,
I think that's a funny quote.
I love that. I think it's cool. I like to see a little bit of banter in F1. I feel like it's all been too lovey-dovey as of late. All the drivers are going to dinner together, which I don't really care for. I want to see a little bit of competition, a little banter, a little smack talk. I think we got it there. Fernando, in his old age, not holding back. Yeah, here's the exact quote. It was not his childhood dream 12 months ago, no? Or 2 months ago, I guess, because it was a different dream.
His dream, and then he finished, his dream was definitely not to drive for Ferrari. I don't know him well enough to know his dreams. That's great.
Thank you for clarifying, by the way, that Fernando Alonso does not have the power to be in another driver's dreams actively. He does not have the Inception tool.
Exactly.
So we'll see. I like that. That's fun. I just want to, last thing before we get going on this pod, I thought this has been a different episode. As always, if you like this, please like or subscribe on YouTube, send it to 3 friends in audio or on YouTube. But a big shout out to the World Rally Championship, which have revealed Chattanooga, Tennessee, potential WRC event happening. They are doing an American rally this year, where WRC officials will sort of do an exhibition, but a true World Rally Championship rally in the United States, March 2026 is what they're expecting.
That would be awesome. And I think you know what? I don't want to say I couldn't think of a better, because there's so many great venues in the United States for a World Rallycross or World Rally Championship. But Chattanooga is a great venue for this. Chattanooga is great at hosting this type of stuff. They've hosted the Ironman World Championships. They've hosted all kinds. It's just it's like a what am I trying to say? Diamond in the rough.
Yep.
Place, part of our country. So that would be.
I want to be there.
Pretty cool.
This
I'd
test event is in June. I want to go. I don't know how to make it happen. I haven't looked at the dates, but I want to be there. I want to be there for real WRC. That is too cool. I've always wanted to see those cars in person. I've always wanted to drive one. I've actually driven a Group N car, which is the lower series of WRC cars, on the Isle of Man, which was right-hand drive, and it's a wild story, with Mark Higgins, who was a rally champ. I'll tell that one another time. But I just always want to see these cars in person. I think it's some of the coolest stuff out there. I think they're the coolest looking cars. So
awesome.
A real USA event would be awesome. Have we missed anything, Landon, on this Monday?
I think
Daytona Eve.
Other than the potential, I could just damper this whole thing with the potential weather you have going on in Daytona this week. So we'll keep an eye on the weather.
Whoa. Don't use that word. Don't you dare.
Sorry. Hopefully you can get this race going on schedule. There's nothing better than the Daytona 500 in the sunshiny 90-degree cars sliding around. It is just a beautiful thing. Daytona in a hot weather. Daytona is just great racing. So I'm looking forward to it.
It's almost a romantic sight. A hot day, Daytona.
It is.
They go from the sun setting late in the race to the nighttime finish. It's poetic. And so hopefully we have that. But I'm looking forward to it. We're getting this season started. We're going to go kick ass in the Xfinity Series, and we're going to keep our eyes on F1, NASCAR Cup Series, and everything in the motorsports world here on the Money Lap. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Money Lap. As always, check out themoneylap.com for the best 5 minutes in motorsports, or sometimes just the coolest stuff in motorsports, delivered directly to your inbox 3 times a week. Check us out on YouTube. We're growing fast over there. And, of course, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We're all over the internet. We're spreading the word of how cool motorsports is. Check us out.